This story, the only place in the Bible where we actually see the great dragon being thrown down to the earth, happened when. Now, the next important place I think we should go when it comes to the New Testament is Luke chapter 10, one of the most, I believe, misunderstood passages in the Bible. This is where Jesus says to his disciples, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Let me give you a little of the context, and I'll highlight it on the screen if you're watching. He said, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Because of this myth that exists in the church that the devil is a fallen angel, a lot of people tend to read this and they go, oh, I know what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about when Satan was cast out of heaven back in eternity past, before God created the heavens and the earth. Satan was an angel. Doesn't it say that somewhere in the Old Testament? Somewhere, I think. And he was thrown out of heaven. He was cast down from heaven. And Jesus is remembering this as his disciples come to him and say, oh my goodness, even the demons are subject to us in your name. This passage is not about something that happened in the past. It's about something that will happen mere months after Jesus uttered these words. Jesus is not reflecting back. He's foreshadowing what will happen to Satan fully and finally once he finishes his work on the cross. That's what this passage is about. How do I know that to be the case? Because the only place in the Bible where we actually see this thing that Jesus talks about, Satan falling like lightning from heaven, the only place we see this come about is in Revelation chapter 12. And Revelation chapter 12 happens to tell us exactly when this event took place. So let's go there. This is Revelation chapter 12. I want to remind you, since we're going to a lot of different places in the Bible here, and we're doing something I don't do a lot, which is sort of parachuting into a lot of different passages, I want to remind you, Revelation is a big book. It's a very specific type of genre in the Bible. It's called apocalyptic literature. There's different ways people have interpreted it throughout history. I could tell you about all of them sometime on a different episode. I've talked about them in past episodes. The book of Revelation is not necessarily chronological. You have to remember that as you study it. Not everything that's described is happening in chronological order. I just want to say that. This, for instance, is a story that happens right after chapter 11, where we see two witnesses in chapter 11 prophesying for time and a half time, basically 3.5 years. And they're prophesying, against the world, and they eventually are killed and then taken up to heaven. A lot of people read that chapter literally and say, this is about the end times, the last, 3.5 of the 7 last years. And these are going to be two witnesses in Jerusalem. That's not how I understand this. I actually think the two witnesses in Revelation 11, me and many others, represent the church during this age that we're living in. It's a whole nother story. But the next thing we see after chapter 11 is this, chapter 12. I'm going to read about 11 verses just so people get what's going on. I say all that to say this doesn't come after that. We're going to hear in this passage exactly when this event took place. I want you to pay attention and see if you pick up on it. Revelation chapter 12, starting in verse 1. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. It's going to be really hard for me to not stop and explain everything about this passage as I read through it. But if you want to know about this passage, just go. We've done whole episodes on it. I've done videos on this. I can put those in the show notes, and I will put those links in the show notes below. Revelation 12:2. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. Oh, there it is. That's the story of Satan being cast out of heaven with 1/3 of the angels in eternity past. That's not what it's about. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. So, woman about to give birth to a child. The dragon, who's a sign that appeared in heaven, is trying to devour the child. Remember what happened when Jesus was born in Bethlehem? The woman in this story represents the faithful, believing remnant of Israel, the people who brought forth the Messiah. She's the remnant, actually, from all of history. The faithful people who looked to God, loved God, believed God. In the Old Testament, those were Israelites who, from their lineage, came forth the Messiah. The woman in this passage will go on to have many offspring. That's where she sort of morphs into the church. Anyway, that's a whole nother issue. Verse 5, she gave birth to a male child who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. There's no doubt who that's about in Revelation. That is about Jesus Christ. This woman is giving birth to Jesus, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days, 3.5 years, times time and a half time. So the woman gives birth to a child who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. The devil was pursuing Jesus throughout his life, trying to defeat him and to overcome him. He ended up killing him because Jesus let him. And then Jesus, what did he do? He ascended into heaven, full of victory, to take his seat at God's right hand. That's what this story is about. It's not about Jesus' birth, even though that's the imagery of a woman giving birth and a dragon trying to get the baby. It's the picture of Jesus coming and then ascending to heaven in victory. That's what happens. She gives birth to a child, one who's to rule the nations, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne. What happens next? The child's caught up to God and to his throne. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated. There was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God, and they have overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. This story, the only place in the Bible where we actually see the great dragon being thrown down to the earth, happened when Jesus ascended. When he died and rose again and then ascended to his Father, the Satan, the adversary, the accuser, was thrown out of heaven. I'm putting air quotes because was he thrown out literally from heaven or figuratively? Either way, I think there's a point to this, which is this. When Jesus gained victory for you and me, the Satan was defanged. How so? His ability to accuse you before God day and night no longer has any standing whatsoever. Why? Because Jesus Christ already paid for your sins. He already took on the punishment for your sins. One other thing, how do I know that this passage about Satan, the dragon, being thrown out of heaven took place at the ascension, at the resurrection and ascension of Jesus, as opposed to sometime in eternity past? Or maybe some people say this is going to happen sometime in the future. I'll tell you why. Because Jesus said so. Not days before he was days away from going to the cross. He's preparing his mind, his soul, his spirit for what he's about to endure. And he's talking with the crowds, and he's talking about how the Son of Man must be lifted up. A voice of God comes down and thunders for the crowd. And Jesus says in John 12, starting in verse 30, this voice has come for your sake, not mine. God is vindicating his son as he's getting ready to go to the cross. And then Jesus says this, now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. He's just about to die. He's just about to die. He's saying, now the ruler of this world will be thrown out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. That's what Jesus said about when Satan would be cast out of heaven. Thanks for watching. My name is Blake, and over the past 20 years, I've been a missionary, a pastor, and a Bible college and seminary professor. During that entire time, I've been teaching the Bible. And if you want more Bible content to come your way, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like this video. And also, check out this video right here.